The war is going very badly for Israel, despite the fact that there's a lot of denial going on in Israel and in Zionist circles about how the war is going. And the reason for that is it's war, so everyone's trying to sell their position. Everyone's trying to show that it's going better than it really is. That's a natural thing in wartime.
Right.
But also, there's a real disconnect between Israel's military achievements and its diplomatic and political ones. And a lot of people are finding that very confusing because Hamas is not really offering much resistance to Israel on the ground. They tried to offer resistance in the first month, it was crushed. And since then, it's basically been avoiding giving resistance, trying to kill Israeli soldiers when it can, mostly by blowing them up when they're resting. But mostly what it's relying on is damage to Israel in the diplomatic sphere and undermining the trust of the Israeli populace in the government through various means, by launching rockets, by you leveraging the hostages, so on and so forth. So what Hamas has managed to do is it's managed to cause more damage to Israel on the diplomatic stage than
Sure.
any of its enemies ever have in its entire history. So
Yeah.
Sinwar has done a very good job from his perspective of that. The ICC and ICJ cases are very good examples of that. The damage with the Biden administration, which Biden understands is a strategic liability, so he's been trying to limit it. There's increased damage with the EU. There's more countries recognizing a Palestinian state than ever. And there's a sense that this is just the start. And in 2 months, the situation could be much worse. So, and then of course you have the fact that a lot of Israeli civilians have been evacuated from their homes, especially in the north, and can't go back. And that's increasingly showing the government as impotent. The inability to bring back the hostages, the inability to kill Sinwar. Israel has not been able to achieve any of its military goals. Sinwar doesn't really care much. Hamas doesn't care about the welfare of the Palestinian people. In fact, when Palestinian civilians get killed, that's good for their PR effort. So there's really no weakness to exploit with Sinwar. He's enjoying what's happening with the war. So right now it's going very badly for Israel. Part of this is self-inflicted because Israel had the opportunity to take over all of Gaza and install a new government or start to install a new government, but it hasn't done that. It's made sure to never occupy all the big cities in Gaza at one time. For example, before it went into Rafah, it evacuated Khan Yunis, the big city in the middle between Gaza City and Rafah, so that everyone in Rafah could evacuate to Khan Yunis. That's not an accident. I think that Netanyahu doesn't want to take over the entire strip so that he's not faced with what to do with the Palestinians in terms of owning the future the day after, whether you're moving towards a Palestinian state or not. Because the two options that face him are a military government, which will be very expensive and will cost a lot of lives for Israelis, and of course, a lot of condemnation because that is occupation.
Right.
Pure occupation, right? People say, "Oh, if you control the borders, it's occupation." Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. But this is really hardcore occupation.
Right.
He doesn't want to do that. And then the other option is to start moving towards a Palestinian state, which is what I support. We're going to talk about liberal Zionism, but that is politically untenable for him because his coalition is based on people who that is the last thing they want. They would rather experience more October 7th than see a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
So that's not an option. So Netanyahu has refused to take over the entire strip and refused to come up with a new government. That means the war can't be won. So right now, Sinwar is running the clock, hoping to see how much damage he can do to Israel until it's forced to stop. So the war is going very badly. Not all Israelis are fully aware of how badly. Some of them are living in bubbles where they think it's going very well because of the military accomplishments, but they don't really mean much.
What kind of bubbles would you say that they're living in that makes them think that things are going bad? Like, what are they being told? What are they listening to?
Well, it's very easy to present the case that Israel is doing well. If you are following accounts that are very rah Zionist, showing the achievements of the war, if you listen to what the IDF is telling you in its briefings, if you watch Channel 14, which is sort of the Israeli version of Fox News, all they do is tell you the achievements of the military. And you don't have to lie. You say, we killed this amount of terrorists, we blew up this amount of tunnels, all that stuff. It can all be real. Just like when the U.S. was in Vietnam, they kept saying, we killed this many Viet Cong, we blew up this many bridges. It doesn't really matter when you don't have a politically tenable way to finish off the war. So a lot of Israelis are doing that. Then there are, even Israelis who follow a little bit of people like me and other people who are more critical of the government. They get so much of the military accomplishments, they don't really see how badly things are going. That's why they're shocked that the Netanyahu government is making offers that are basically a form of surrender, because he's acting tough, he's saying tough things, but in the negotiation room, he's giving away everything because the things are going so badly. And you talked about how the Palestinians are being treated as another question, and the two things are linked, very heavily linked, because we talked about how Netanyahu can't move to the next phase of the war because his main goal uh, is to avoid having a Palestinian state. And
Right.
what the Israeli government has done for a very long time is it's played a game of divide and conquer, where Hamas sits in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority sits in the West Bank. And as long as that happens, you can't negotiate over a Palestinian state. You can say you're going to, but there's no way to do it. And his fear is that the PA will be strong enough and legitimate enough that he won't be able to avoid having that conversation. And that's what he was doing when he was allowing Hamas to stay in Gaza for a very long time. And that's what he's doing now when he's tacitly, without ever admitting it, allowing Hamas to continue to survive in Gaza.
What a mess. What a mess. From the Israeli perspective, what a mess. I mean, how are they going to get out of this in a way that is, I because you're right, the view of Israel now from the world is very different today than it was a year ago. There might have been some countries that were skeptical or maybe wondered, but and many people, even just average people, especially here in America, that we've always been told since we were very young growing up, that Israel's just under attack by these terrorists, and we only got a one-sided viewpoint of what's going on. But now with social media, now with the ability for people to see with their own eyes what's happening, governments around the world and individuals are starting to turn on Israel and viewing it as a pariah state. I mean, just very much viewing it as a state that has a radical regime that needs to be somehow limited or toppled or something. So diplomatically, you're right. This is a disaster for Israel, and if they keep going to whatever end the end that I think Ben Gvir and Smotrich want, which is what, to take over the entire strip and to voluntarily have the Palestinians migrate out, right? Because conditions are so terrible, you can't live here. So we're just going to let you can choose to go and hope that all of them go in a very kind of forcibly way, but calling it voluntary, that's going to just make Israel, if that happens, if we go down the path what Ben Gvir and Smotrich want, that's the end of Israel in the eyes of the world. The world will not accept that.
Yeah, my instinct as a longtime defender of Israel, someone who's worked for the Israeli government, is to push back against what you're saying, but I really can't. I can't, because the current government is going in a way that is not only completely inhumane to the Palestinians, but also is incredibly self-defeating. Destroys Israel's position in the world, and in the long term, it will make sure that there won't be an Israel.
Right.
Because if Israel incorporates Gaza, and also they're not just focusing on Gaza, a very underrated part of this entire conflict is what's going on right now in the West Bank. There is a war in the West Bank. It's on a lower scale, but also the current finance minister, who you mentioned, Smotrich, is doing everything he can to completely defund the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah.
And the Palestinian Authority is the only thing stopping Hamas and other terrorist organizations. The Islamic Jihad is also strong there. The Lion's Den is also strong there. Those three organizations from taking over the entire West Bank. They're the only thing stopping it from doing so politically. Obviously, militarily, the IDF is there, but politically, it's only the PA. And they're defunding it intentionally so that the PA will collapse and all of the West Bank will be under Israeli control. That's the vision that Smotrich and Ben Gvir have. The vision that Netanyahu has is a little bit different. It's to keep the status quo where the PA is weak. But Ben Gvir and Smotrich are getting more and more power. And if that happens, then there's going to be Israel ruling over a hostile Palestinian population run by terrorists And how that ends when it gets less and less support from the entire world it's a true existential threat that will also be paired with the fact that Iran is going to be having a nuclear weapon very soon, and Israel hasn't been
Right.
able to prevent that. So just disaster after disaster.
Right. And in that case, I have to say, I have to push back just slightly on this one. I agree with everything you've said, except that the term terrorists, when it comes to if a group of Palestinian people are under the direct control of Israel and they're not given the equal rights, they're not given Israeli citizenship in order to participate as equal, then I don't think those people are terrorists. They then would be I mean, they are that would for sure be a resistance fighter. I mean, somebody you have to liberate your people. You have to liberate yourself.
Well, the term terrorist is an unfortunate term in some ways. It doesn't really differentiate whether your cause is just or not, at least not in
Okay,
the
that's
political
true. Sure.
science world
Mm.
or in the technical definition world. What it really means is you're a non-state actor that targets civilians in order to accomplish a political goal. If you only target military, you're a guerrilla group, but
Okay.
these organizations don't. So they are, by any definition of international law, they're terrorists.
Okay, maybe Hamas after October 7th, but even then, I don't think their targets were civilians. I think they were just I think that I don't know. I think we could kind of debate and kind of go over all of the things that happened with October 7th that might show that most of the actual Hamas fighters were truly targeting military installations with civilians that happened to be you don't agree with that. You think that they
No,
targeted.
they massacred people in civilian settlements like Be'eri and others. They also attacked military bases for sure, but there was
Right.
women and children that were intentionally targeted and killed, and they knew the entire
Right.
area, and they did that intentionally. And I grew up in Jerusalem, going on buses that were bombed by Hamas all the time, and I have friends that were blown up on the 14 bus and the 18 bus in Jerusalem, and they were I was a teenager and they were teenagers too, and
Yeah.
I
Okay,
grew
so
up across from this Sbarro restaurant, and I saw the remains of little children that had been
yeah,
blown up by Hamas. So
right.
this is what they do.
Which is terrible. I understand that there is acts of terrorism for sure, just like there was with the Irish, and there was definitely terrorist groups. Um, and even the founding of Israel, there was terrorist organizations that were looking to, there was a political agenda there. I think though, when it comes to the West Bank, I think it's harder to make that case. The IDF is everywhere in the West Bank. I mean, they're all over the place, and the West Bank, the people are fighting against, the people there when they throw rocks, they're throwing rocks at IDF soldiers when all of that is really what civilians are there for them to attack inside of the West
There's
Bank.
settlers in the West Bank, which although
I
they should
wouldn't,
not be there, they
right.
should not be there
So
in my
are they
opinion.
civilians? So then would you
Yeah,
count them as civilians? I
of
don't count
course.
them as they
If a
can't be counted
person
as civilians.
if women and children live, and men who are not in the military live anywhere in the world, they're civilians. You don't have to have a legal right to be somewhere to be a civilian. For example, if undocumented workers come into Texas and you shoot them, they're still civilians. They're not supposed to be there. Legally, they're not supposed to
Right.
be there. But you can't just open M16s on them and say they're not civilians. They're civilians, and you can't kill them. And yeah, sometimes these organizations target IDF, but one of the main reasons that they target the IDF primarily in the West Bank is because the IDF keeps them from hitting civilians. They kill a lot of settlers, by the way, but they generally keep them out of Israel proper. But you certainly have a better case with organizations there. They're very busy fighting the IDF, but some of them are the same organizations in Gaza that try to kill civilians. So the lines are very blurry, and they want
Yeah.
to destroy Israel, and they say so.
I'll give you that. There are definitely areas inside the West Bank where the settlements are really truly civilians. There's also settlers who are not really civilians. They might seem like, they might not technically be IDF, but they're absolutely armed and dangerous, and they're not civilians,
Absolutely.
right?
But usually those aren't the targets that Palestinian terrorists are going after. Terrorists like to go after softer targets, usually people driving, very often families, things like that. You don't want to target the armed guy with military experience. It's a harder target to hit.
Right. Um, well, and that is a complicated. I agree that there's civilians. It's complicated when it's settlements that are expanding illegally in areas that they're not supposed to be in. People are now having this kind of hostile takeover of their land, right? So then the question then becomes, what do they do about that? Um,
I'm not going
That's
to
a
push back on that. I'm an
yeah, it's
opponent of
tricky.
the settlements. I just don't think that you should be
No,
killing
yeah, I get it.
families. Yeah.
Right. Right, and I agree with you. I don't think you should be killing families at all. It would be better to go after the military targets. But yeah, it's such a complicated
It would be
situation, right?
better if no one went after any targets, and the Israeli government and the PA sat and talked and resolved this.
Well,
That's what
okay.
we. No,
Yes,
no,
that
but
would be
this is an
best.
important point because what a
Yeah.
lot of people are doing, and I feel like you're doing a little bit in this interview, is encouraging people to use force to liberate themselves or whatever. That's actually not a good path towards national liberation. A lot of social science studies have shown that nonviolent protest is often the most effective. And the reason is because it changes public opinion in the other country. I'm old enough to remember the 90s, I was a kid, when most Israelis supported a peace agreement with the Palestinians. Why? Because enough of us felt that the Palestinians genuinely wanted their own country and not to kill us. Then the Second Intifada happened, and most of us, including myself, were convinced that all the Palestinians want to do is kill every Israeli. Since then, I've rethought my position and realized that that kind of thinking only leads to more conflict. We can think, oh, the Palestinians are all, there's no civilians there, they're all terrorists. So many Israelis tell me that. And the Palestinians can think they're all settlers, they're all going to be IDF. The only way is to kill them. So many Palestinians think that. But if more of us sit and think, what we need to do is encourage our leaders to sit and talk, not to kill each other. That might actually happen. And that's why I encourage everyone on all sides not to run around encouraging violence. I know it sounds banal, but everyone is doing it nowadays. But rather to encourage peace talks, to encourage leaders who want to talk to each other. Believe me, Israelis are not going to put down their guns and surrender. They will fight as long as they can because most Israelis have nowhere to go. And the Palestinians are not going to go because the IDF is bombing. Palestine is their home. No one's going anywhere. It's time that we sat down and talked and worked things out.
Right.
And that's the
Right.
liberal Zionists. Yes, what that is. That's what it is. Israel's here to stay. Palestinians are here to stay. We need to talk, not kill each other.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which you could catch just by heading to that link down below, KimIversonShow.com. You can watch the full show from what you just watched, or you could catch the full show live Monday through Friday, live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Never miss an episode. Never miss a clip. Never miss a segment. Thanks, guys.